My name is Eleonora, and at 32 years old, I thought I understood what it meant to be overlooked. I'd spent my entire life watching my younger sister get everything handed to her while I worked for scraps. But nothing prepared me for the day my own father fired me after just 6 hours on the job and announced my sister as CEO. What he didn't know was that my grandfather had left me something far more valuable than sympathy. He'd left me a way out. Before I tell you what my father forgot, let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. What happened in that boardroom changed everything, and you won't believe how it all fell apart for them. Growing up, I always knew I was different from my sister Madison. We were only 4 years apart, but we might as well have been from different planets. My father Richard was 58 now, a man who'd married into the Sterling family legacy when he wed my mother. My grandfather Howard had founded Sterling and Company back in 1975. It started as a small textile operation in Portland, but Howard had vision. He believed in sustainable fashion before it was trendy and ethical labor practices, before anyone cared. By the time I was born, Sterling was worth $50 million. I remember being 10 years old sitting in Grandpa Howard's office at the factory. The smell of cotton and dye, the hum of machines, the pride in his voice as he explained margin calculations to me. Most kids would have been bored, but I was fascinated. I wanted to understand every piece of how the business worked. Howard saw something in me even then. He'd take me on factory tours every Sunday, explaining supply chains and production costs, while other kids my age were at soccer practice. Then everything changed when I was 12. My mother died in a car accident on a rainy November evening. She'd been driving home from a charity event, lost control on a wet road. The grief nearly destroyed our family. My father withdrew into himself. Madison cried for weeks, and I felt like I was drowning. The only constant was Grandpa Howard. Those Sunday visits became my lifeline. He didn't try to replace my mother, but he gave me something to hold on to when everything else felt like it was falling apart. 3 years later, when I was 15, my father remarried. Her name was Linda, a real estate agent he'd met at a business conference. She was polished, put together, and she had very clear ideas about how things should be. From the moment she moved in, I could feel the shift. Linda looked at Madison and saw potential. She looked at me and saw a reminder of my father's first wife. I had my mother's dark hair, her strong features, her stubborn independence. Madison was blonde, like Linda, softer, more malleable. The favoritism wasn't subtle. When Madison wanted a pony for her 13th birthday, she got two. When I asked for business textbooks, I was told to be more fun like my sister. Madison got a red convertible when she turned 16. I got a used sedan that broke down every other week. My birthday parties became quiet family dinners, while Madison's were extravagant events with 50 friends and catered food. I threw myself into school. If I couldn't earn my father's love, I'd earn his respect through achievement. I graduated with straight A's, was captain of the debate team, won scholarships. Madison barely graduated, but that was fine. She was creative, my father said. She had artistic vision. I got into Northwestern for business partially on scholarship and worked 3 jobs to cover the rest. Madison went to a fashion school in Los Angeles, fully paid with a monthly allowance and a new apartment. Every achievement I earned, my father found a way to diminish it. Business degree, common. Everyone has one. Madison's artistic vision. Now that was rare. That was special. I graduated summa cum laude at 22 and applied for a position at Sterling. My father said no. I needed outside experience first, he claimed. Meanwhile, Madison, who hadn't even finished fashion school, got an internship immediately. She needed to learn the family business, you see. So I left Portland. Spent the next 10 years building a resume that should have impressed anyone. I worked in retail management in Chicago, supply chain consulting in Denver, operations in San Francisco. At each job I excelled, got promoted rapidly, earned recognition. I'd send my achievements to my father and get silence in return. But when Madison posted Instagram photos from the Sterling office, my father would comment with pride. The double standard wasn't just clear, it was deliberate. Through it all, Grandpa Howard remained my anchor. We'd talk on the phone every Sunday, just like our old factory visits. He never said it directly, but I knew he saw what was happening. He saw Richard's favoritism, Linda's manipulation, Madison's laziness. But it was his son's family, and Howard was old school. He wouldn't interfere openly. Instead, he made time for me. He listened. He reminded me who I was. When I turned 28, everything changed again. Howard was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. 82 years old, sharp as ever mentally, but his body was failing. The diagnosis gave him maybe 6 months. I took a leave of absence from my job in San Francisco and moved back to Portland. Someone needed to take care of him, and we all knew it wouldn't be Richard or Madison. Richard visited weekly, but spent most of the time on business calls. Madison came once, stayed 30 minutes, took selfies with Grandpa for her social media, and left. I was there every day, making sure he took his medications, reading to him, just sitting quietly when the pain was bad. We talked for hours about everything. The business life, regrets, hopes. One evening, about 3 months before he died, he looked at me with those sharp blue eyes and said something that changed everything. "I'm worried about Sterling," he admitted. "Your father is competent, but he doesn't have the vision. And Madison, well." He trailed off, didn't need to finish. We both knew Madison couldn't run a lemonade stand, let alone a $50 million company. 3 weeks later, Grandpa Howard called me into his study. His lawyer was there, a woman named Dorothy Chang. She was 65, with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun and eyes that missed nothing. I'd met her a few times over the years. She'd been Howard's lawyer for 30 years, had drafted every important document in Sterling's history. "Sit down," Eleanora Howard said. His voice was weaker now, but still commanding. "We need to talk about the future." I sat confused. Dorothy pulled out a thick folder of documents. Howard explained the current ownership structure. He still owns 60% of Sterling. Over the years, he'd given Richard 40%. When Howard died, the standard plan was to split that 60%. Richard would get 30% more, bringing his total to 70%. Madison and I would each get 15%. "That's not fair to you," Howard said bluntly. I started to protest, but he held up his hand. "Let me finish." Dorothy opened the folder. What Howard explained next took my breath away. Years ago, 12 years to be exact, he'd had Dorothy draft a special clause into Sterling's bylaws. It was buried deep in the legal language, the kind of thing most people skimmed over or had lawyers summarize. The clause stated that if the majority shareholder made a decision that 3 board members deemed detrimental to company values and vision, an emergency vote could be called. If that vote passed, the CEO could be removed. And here was the crucial part: the person with the second largest shareholding would automatically assume control. Now Howard continued, "I'm changing my will. You're getting 35% of my shares. Madison gets 10. Richard keeps his 30. The rest goes to minority shareholders and the employee trust." I couldn't speak. My throat was tight with emotion. "Grandpa, that will cause a war." Maybe he said, his thin hand gripping mine. "But you've earned it. I've watched you for years, Eleanora. You're the only one who truly cares about what we built. You have the work ethic, the vision, the values. You're me reborn." "The clause has been in the bylaws for 12 years, Dorothy explained, her voice crisp and professional. "Your father doesn't know it exists. Most people never read past page 50 of corporate bylaws. But there are conditions. You can only trigger it if his actions genuinely harm the company. Not just hurt your feelings, but actual demonstrable business damage. And you need 3 board members to vote with you." I looked at Dorothy, then at Howard. "Why tell me this now?" "Because I won't be here to protect you much longer," he said softly. "And I need to know Sterling will survive. Your father means well, but he's weak. He'll run this company into the ground trying to prop up Madison's ego. When that moment comes, and it will come, you need to be ready." We spent the next hour going over details. The 7-member board. 3 were old friends of Howard's people who shared his values. Dr. Patricia Okoye, a former supply chain executive who'd built her career on ethical business practices. James Rutherford, a finance expert who'd known Howard for 30 years. Maria Gonzalez, a sustainability consultant who'd worked with Sterling for 20 years. These 3 would understand. They'd see what needed to be done. The other 2 board members had been appointed by Richard more recently. Brad Stevenson, a venture capitalist focused purely on profits. Catherine Wells, a corporate lawyer, and Richard's friend from college. They'd be harder to convince, but we didn't need them. 3 votes were enough. Dorothy handed me a card. "When the time comes, call me. I'll guide you through the legal process. But timing is everything. You'll need irrefutable evidence that his decision harms Sterling. Not just bad judgment, but actual damage. Howard gripped my hand tighter. I believe in you. Sometimes the right person has to wait. But when your moment comes, take it. Don't hesitate. Don't doubt yourself. Take what's yours. He died 2 weeks later. It was peaceful in his sleep with me holding his hand. The funeral was huge, hundreds of people whose lives he'd touched, employees who'd worked for Sterling for decades, community leaders, sustainability advocates. My father gave a eulogy about Howard's legacy. Madison cried prettily for the cameras. Linda wore an expensive black dress and accepted condolences like a grieving daughter-in-law. I stood quietly in the back and felt like my heart had been carved out. The will reading was exactly as explosive as I'd expected. We gathered in Dorothy's office 1 week after the funeral. When she announced the share distribution, Richard's face went purple with rage. "This is wrong," he shouted. He wasn't thinking clearly. The cancer affected his judgment. "We need to contest this." Dorothy's voice was ice cold. The will was drafted 6 months ago before any cognitive decline. It was witnessed by 3 independent parties. Mr. Sterling was evaluated by 2 separate psychiatrists who confirmed his mental competency. "This will is ironclad. You can contest it if you wish, but you'll lose and waste a lot of money in the process." Madison was crying. "Why does she get more than me? It's not fair." Linda was furious, her mask of propriety slipping. "This is an insult to your daughter, Richard. You need to fight this." I said nothing, just sat there and let them rage. Finally, Richard turned to me. "You put him up to this. You manipulated a dying old man." I met his eyes steadily. "I loved him. That's all. If you see that as manipulation, that says more about you than me." The meeting ended with threats of lawsuits that never materialized. Because Dorothy was right. The will was unbreakable. I walked out of that office with 35% of Sterling and Company. But more importantly, I walked out with a plan. My father and sister didn't know about the clause. That was my ace in the hole. Dorothy had advised me to wait. "Don't waste this gift," she'd said. "Wait for the right moment. Wait until he does something so obviously damaging that even his allies can't defend it." So I waited. The next 4 years were the longest of my life. I continued working at other companies, building my skills, watching Sterling from the outside. I attended every shareholder meeting. As a 35% owner, I had that right. I sat quietly, took notes, observed. Richard never acknowledged me beyond a curt nod. Madison would sometimes wave oblivious to the tension. Sterling was declining, slowly, steadily, like a patient with a chronic illness. Revenue dropped 8% in the first 2 years after Howard's death. Quality complaints increased by 30%. The company nearly lost its sustainability certification when inspectors found issues with working conditions at a contracted facility. Customer satisfaction scores plummeted. None of it was catastrophic enough to trigger the clause, but it all added up. The company my grandfather built with his bare hands was being run into the ground by mediocrity and nepotism. I applied for positions at Sterling 4 times over those 4 years. Each application was more qualified than the last. Each time, Richard found a reason to say no. Not the right fit. Timing isn't good. We need different expertise right now. Meanwhile, Madison was promoted to design director, despite having no formal training and barely showing up 3 days a week. Her designs were derivative at best, stolen at worst. I watched her present mood boards that I'd seen on Pinterest weeks earlier. No one called her out. Richard praised her innovation. I started building relationships with the 3 board members I'd need. It was delicate work. Lunches with Patricia where we'd discuss ethical supply chains, and she'd voice her frustrations with Sterling's direction. Coffee with James where he'd pull out financial reports and shake his head at Richard's decisions. Site visits with Maria to factories where she'd point out cut corners and whisper that this wasn't what Howard would have wanted. I never mentioned the clause. Not yet. But I documented everything. Every poor decision, every missed opportunity, every time Richard chose short-term profit over long-term sustainability. I built a case slowly, methodically, the way a prosecutor builds a case before trial. Patricia, James, and Maria could see what was happening. They trusted me. They saw my grandfather in me. When I was 31, Richard made a decision that nearly triggered my plan. He decided to outsource production to a factory in Bangladesh. The labor was cheaper, the margins higher. It looked good on paper. Maria found out first and was livid. She called me, her voice shaking with anger. This factory has terrible working conditions. Children working 12-hour days. No safety standards. This is everything your grandfather stood against. She confronted Richard at the next board meeting. I was there sitting in the back as always. Richard dismissed her concerns with a wave of his hand. It's just business, Maria. We can't compete if we're paying American wages for every piece. This goes against everything Sterling stands for, she said. We'll lose our certifications. Our customers will leave us. Then we'll find new customers, Richard said coldly. The market is changing. We need to change with it. Maria threatened to resign. Richard shrugged. Your choice. The decision is made. News of the factory conditions leaked to a trade publication. The backlash was immediate. 3 major retail partnerships canceled their contracts. Sterling's stock value dropped 15% in a week. Social media exploded with accusations of hypocrisy. A sustainable fashion company using sweatshop labor. The irony was vicious. Richard's solution was to hire a PR firm and bury the story. He never fixed the actual problem, just paid people to make it go away. I watched all of this and knew I was getting close, but it still wasn't quite enough. I needed something bigger, something that even Brad and Catherine couldn't ignore or spin. Then when I was 32, Richard finally gave me what I needed. I'd applied one last time for a position at Sterling. This time I didn't just send a resume. I sent a comprehensive proposal for a chief operating officer position. 50 pages detailing how I'd restore Sterling's reputation. Fix the supply chain, disasters, rebuild sustainability certifications, modernize operations while honoring Howard's values. I attached testimonials from my previous employers, case studies of successful projects I'd led, financial projections. Richard called me 2 weeks later. His voice was grudging. Fine. You can have a position. I felt a surge of hope. He actually laughed. No. Director of Operations, you'll report to Madison. I almost hung up. Director was 3 levels below COO. Reporting to Madison, who'd never managed anything in her life, was an insult. But then I realized this was my way in. Get inside the building. Get access to records. Be there when Richard made his final unforgivable mistake. Okay, I said. When do I start? 3 weeks. Don't disappoint me, Eleonora. I won't, I said. And I meant it, just not in the way he thought. June 15th, Monday morning, my official first day at Sterling and Company. I woke up at 5 a.m. too excited to sleep longer. Spent an hour getting ready. Navy blue suit, simple but professional. Pearl earrings my mother had left me. And my grandfather's briefcase, the worn leather one he'd carried for 40 years. He'd given it to me 2 days before he died. This has held a lot of dreams, he'd said. Now it'll hold yours. I drove to the Sterling headquarters in Portland's Pearl District. The building was beautiful, a converted warehouse with exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows. Sustainable design throughout, solar panels on the roof, reclaimed wood floors. It was everything Howard had envisioned. I parked in the lot and sat for a moment, taking it in. I was finally here, finally inside. The receptionist recognized me. Ms. Sterling, welcome. Your office is on the 3rd floor, room 312. I took the elevator up. The building smelled like success, like possibility. Employees passed me in the hallways. Some smiled. Some looked curious. They all knew who I was. Howard's granddaughter. The one who'd been kept out for years. I could see hope in their faces. Maybe things would get better now. My office was small. Interior. No windows, barely enough room for a desk and 2 chairs. Madison's office, I'd learned, was a corner suite on the top floor with river views. I didn't care. I wasn't here for the office. I unpacked my briefcase, set up my laptop, reviewed the files I'd been sent. At 10 a.m., I had my first meeting with the operations team. 6 people who'd been struggling under poor management for years. They were wary at first, but I knew my stuff. We talked about supply chain optimization, inventory, management, quality control. I could see them relaxing, realizing I actually understood the work. By the end of the hour, one of the designers, a woman named Sophie, whispered as she left, maybe things really will change now. I spent the rest of the morning diving into files, meeting more team members, understanding the systems. It felt good. It felt right. Like I was finally where I belonged. Around noon, my phone rang. Richard's assistant, Mr. Sterling, wants to see you. His office. Now. I saved my work, grabbed a notepad, walked to the elevator, wrote it to the top floor. Richard's office was at the end of the hall, the biggest room, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Portland. It used to be Howard's office. Being there now felt like a violation. Richard sat behind the massive oak desk. Madison was sprawled on the leather couch, scrolling through her phone. Neither looked up when I entered. "Sit down," Richard said. His tone was cold, transactional. I sat in the chair across from his desk, kept my expression neutral. "What can I help you with?" Richard looked at Madison, then back at me. "This isn't going to work." I blinked. "I'm sorry, you." "Here. It's not working. I've been here 6 hours." Madison finally looked up from her phone. "You're making people uncomfortable. They keep coming to you with questions instead of me." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "They're asking about operations. That's my job." Richard leaned forward. "I'm letting you go, Eleonora." The words hung in the air. I let them sit there for a moment, processing. "You're firing me on my first day?" "Yes, it's not the right fit. We'll give you 2 weeks severance." The absurdity was almost funny. I'd worked for 10 years to get here, spent 4 years waiting for the right moment, and now my father was firing me after 6 hours because I was too competent. "I see," I said slowly. "And you agree with this, Madison?" She shrugged, not even bothering to look apologetic. "It's Dad's decision. Plus, I think you're just threatened by my success." I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. "Your success?" "Right." Richard stood up. "Clean out your desk. Security will escort you out." He walked to the window, his back to me. "One more thing. I'm announcing Madison as CEO this afternoon. There's a board meeting on Friday to make it official." Everything stopped. "CEO Madison." "She's been here 8 years," Richard said defensively. "She's ready. She understands the brand." I stood slowly. Understanding the brand and running a $50 million company are very different things. "That's not your concern anymore," Richard said. I looked at Madison. She was smiling now, pleased with herself. "Name 3 current projects you're working on." Silence. Her smile faltered. The spring line, and social media strategy, and brand awareness. Can you name the revenue from any of those?" More silence. Richard cut in, his voice sharp. "Enough. This is happening. The board will vote Friday and Madison will be CEO. I'll move to executive chairman. It's decided." I picked up my notepad, walked to the door, turned back. "Friday. What time is the meeting?" 2 p.m. "Not that you need to attend." "Actually, as a 35% shareholder, I do need to attend. It's in the bylaws." Richard's jaw tightened. "Fine, but keep your mouth shut. This doesn't concern you." I smiled. "Small cold. We'll see." I walked out. Didn't go to my office. There was nothing there to pack anyway. Just walked straight through the building, past the curious stairs, out to my car. Sat in the driver's seat and took a long, deep breath. Then I called Dorothy Chang. "It's time," I said when she answered. Her voice was sharp alert. "What happened?" I explained everything. Fired after 6 hours. Madison being made CEO. The board meeting on Friday. Dorothy was quiet for a moment. Then, "This is it. This is your trigger." Making someone with no qualifications CEO of a $50 million company absolutely qualifies as detrimental to company values and vision. "Do you think I can get the votes?" "If you prepare properly, yes. Patricia, James, and Maria will vote with you if you give them irrefutable evidence. Start gathering everything. Financial reports, customer complaints, employee surveys, Madison's lack of qualifications. Build your case. Make it so strong that even Richard's allies have to see it." "I will." Eleonora, Dorothy said, her voice softer now. "Your grandfather knew this day would come. He prepared you for it. Trust yourself." That afternoon, I called Patricia. We met at a quiet coffee shop in Southeast Portland, the kind of place with mismatched furniture and locally roasted beans. Patricia arrived looking concerned. I'd never called her for an urgent meeting before. "I heard you were let go," she said as she sat down. "Richard called me this morning. Wanted to make sure I'd support Madison's appointment as CEO. What did you tell him that I'd consider it? But honestly, Eleonora, the idea of Madison running Sterling makes me sick. I took a breath. There's something you need to know. Something my grandfather did 12 years ago. I explained the clause, watched Patricia's eyes widen as she understood the implications. Howard did that 12 years ago. He knew Richard wasn't the right person to lead long term. He wanted to protect Sterling's future. Patricia sat back processing. This is risky. Richard will fight back. It could get ugly. I pulled out my laptop, showed her the file I'd started building. 4 years of documentation. Every poor decision Richard had made, the financial decline, the quality issues, the sustainability violations, the Bangladesh factory disaster, customer satisfaction dropping 30%, employee turnover up 45%, revenue down $20 million over 4 years. Patricia reviewed it all, her expression growing grimmer. And now he wants to make Madison, who has 0 business training and 0 management experience, CEO? Exactly. She looked up at me. This is more than enough. This is a pattern of destructive leadership culminating in an absolutely reckless decision. I'm in. I'll vote to remove Richard and support you as CEO. 1 down, 2 to go. That evening, I met James at an Italian restaurant downtown. He was already at the table when I arrived, a glass of red wine in front of him. He stood when he saw me, gave me a hug. "I'm sorry about today," he said. "Richard's treating you shamefully." We ordered food. I waited until the waiter left, then leaned forward. "James, I need to tell you something, and I need your complete confidence." I explained everything. The clause, the 4 years of evidence, Madison's impending appointment. James listened without interrupting, his decades of financial expertise showing in how quickly he grasped the implications. "Can you prove his decisions have been financially detrimental?" he asked. I pulled out printed financial reports, showed him the decline in revenue, the increased costs from quality issues, the money lost from canceled contracts, showed him projections of what would happen under Madison's leadership. James studied every number, his expression darkening. "This is damning," he said finally. "Richard has cost Sterling over $20 million in 4 years, and making Madison CEO someone who can't even read a balance sheet, that's not just bad judgment. That's financial suicide. Will you vote with me?" He didn't hesitate. "Yes, Sterling is Howard's legacy. I won't watch it destroyed by nepotism and incompetence. You have my vote. 2 down, 1 to go." The next morning, Tuesday, I met Maria at the original Sterling factory. It was a small building on the edge of town, the one Howard had started in back in '75. Sterling had long outgrown it, but Howard never sold it. Sometimes Maria gave tours there, showing new employees where it all began, where the dream started. We walked through the empty production floor. Our footsteps echoed in the silence. Maria pointed to a photo on the wall. "Your grandfather first day. Look how young he was. 28 years old, with nothing but a dream and determination." We ended up in Howard's old office, preserved exactly as it had been. His desk, his chair, his filing cabinets full of original designs and contracts. I sat in his chair, felt close to him. Howard mentioned something to me once, Maria said quietly, about 6 months before he died. Said he'd made arrangements, made sure the right person could take over if Richard failed. I didn't understand then, but I think I do now. I told her about the clause, about the plan, about everything. Maria didn't look surprised. She walked to the window, looked out at the neighborhood where Sterling had been born. Madison, as CEO, would destroy everything, she said. Not just the business, but Howard's values. Sterling was built on ethical labor, environmental sustainability, community investment. Richard only cares about profit margins. Madison only cares about looking good on Instagram. She turned back to me. "You're asking if I'll vote with you?" "Yes." Her answer was immediate. "Of course, you're Howard's true heir. Not by blood, well, yes, by blood, but more importantly, by spirit. You understand what he built and why it matters. You have my vote." 3 votes secured. It was enough. I spent Wednesday and Thursday working around the clock. Dorothy came to my apartment. We spread documents across my dining room table and built the case. We needed to prove that Richard's decision to make Madison CEO was detrimental, not just questionable, not just nepotistic, but actively harmful to Sterling's future. The presentation came together piece by piece. Madison's complete lack of qualifications, no completed degree, no management training, no understanding of finance operations, supply chain, HR, legal compliance. 8 years at Sterling, but in a made-up position where she'd never been held accountable for results. Then Richard's track record. The numbers told a brutal story. Revenue down from 72 million to 52 million. Customer satisfaction scores dropped from 91% to 63%. Employee turnover up from 12% annually to 57%. 3 major retail partnerships lost. Sustainability certifications nearly revoked twice. The Bangladesh factory scandal that cost Sterling millions in reputation and contracts. We added comparison data, showed similar companies in the sustainable fashion space, their leadership qualifications, their financial performance. Sterling was falling behind competitors because of poor leadership. Dorothy found legal precedent. 3 similar cases where board members had removed CEOs using clauses like Howard's. All had held up in court. The key was demonstrating clear harm to the company. By Thursday night, we had a 40-slide presentation. Comprehensive, undeniable, devastating. I barely slept. Kept reviewing the material, making sure every fact was correct, every argument sound. Thought about my grandfather. "This is for you," I whispered to the darkness. "This is for everything you built." Friday arrived. The Sterling boardroom was on the 10th floor with windows overlooking downtown Portland. Mount Hood was visible in the distance, snow-capped and majestic. It was 2 p.m. All 7 board members were present. Richard sat at the head of the long table. Madison sat beside him, fidgeting nervously. Patricia, James, and Maria sat on one side. Brad and Catherine, Richard's allies, sat on the other. Dorothy was there as company counsel, her expression professionally neutral. I entered last, took the seat at the far end of the table facing Richard. He glared at me. "This is a formality. Shouldn't take long." He called the meeting to order, read through standard procedural items, then got to the main agenda. "I'm proposing Madison Sterling as Chief Executive Officer of Sterling and Company effective immediately. I'll move to the position of Executive Chairman, focusing on strategic vision, while Madison handles day-to-day operations. She's been with the company for 8 years. She's ready." Madison tried to look confident. Failed. Questions Richard asked. He clearly expected none. Brad spoke first. "What are her specific qualifications?" Madison launched into a rambling answer. "I've been here 8 years. I know the brand. I've built our social media presence. I understand our customers. Can you describe your management experience?" Patricia asked, her tone deceptively gentle. I oversee the design team." "How many people report directly to you?" James asked. Madison hesitated. 3, no 4. "Well, they don't technically report to me, they're more like collaborators." "What's Sterling's current revenue?" Maria asked. Silence. Madison didn't know. "What are our 3 largest expenses?" James pressed. More silence. "Can you name our top 5 retail partners?" Madison looked desperately at Richard. "Dad." Richard intervened, his voice sharp. "Her value isn't just quantifiable metrics. She brings vision, creativity, fresh energy. Sterling needs to evolve, and Madison represents our future." Catherine jumped in, clearly coached. "I support the nomination. The fashion industry values innovation and brand awareness. Madison excels at both." Brad nodded slowly. "I can see the argument." Richard relaxed slightly. "Let's vote then." "Wait," I said. Everyone turned. Richard's expression darkened. "You don't get a vote? You're not a board member." "No," I said calmly. "But according to Sterling's bylaws, any shareholder controlling more than 20% of company shares has the right to raise concerns before a major vote." Section 12, subsection 4. Dorothy nodded. "That's correct." Richard's jaw clenched. "What section?" "Section 12, subsection 4, Dorothy repeated. "It's been in the bylaws since 2013. I don't remember that being added." Dorothy's expression didn't change. "It was added by Howard Sterling during a routine bylaw review." "You signed off on it." Richard looked like he wanted to argue, but he couldn't challenge documented fact. Fine. What are your concerns, Eleonora? I stood, walked to the screen at the front of the room, plugged in my laptop. I've prepared a presentation. This will take approximately 15 minutes. Richard started to object. James cut him off. Let her speak. She has the right, Maria added. We should hear all perspectives before such an important vote, I began. The first slide showed Madison's resume. High school diploma, 2 years at a fashion school, no degree, no formal business training, no management certifications, 8 years at Sterling in a position with no clear responsibilities or measurable outcomes. The second slide showed typical CEO qualifications in the sustainable fashion industry. MBA or equivalent, 10 plus years of progressive management experience, proven track record of revenue growth, deep understanding of finance operations and strategy. The contrast was stark. I continued, showed Richard's 4-year track record. Every decline, every mistake, every poor decision in brutal detail. Revenue dropping $20 million, customer satisfaction plummeting. The Bangladesh factory scandal, lost partnerships, near loss of sustainability certifications, employee morale at an all-time low. Brad shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Catherine tried to argue. Every CEO faces setbacks. These aren't setbacks, Patricia said firmly. This is a pattern of destructive leadership. I showed more slides. Financial projections under current leadership. Industry comparisons showing Sterling falling behind competitors. Employee survey results showing 73% of staff believe the company was heading in the wrong direction. Then I showed what making Madison CEO would likely result in. Further revenue decline, more lost partnerships, potential bankruptcy within 3 years. The room was silent except for my voice. Richard slammed his hand on the table. This is inappropriate. Eleonora is biased. She wanted this position herself. I turned to face him directly. I was fired after 6 hours. But this isn't about me. This is about Sterling's survival, about honoring what Grandpa Howard built. Howard's been dead for 4 years, Richard snapped. Times change. The company needs new direction. It needs competent direction, I said. Not nepotism disguised as innovation. That's enough, Richard shouted. We're voting now. Actually, no, I said. My voice was calm, cold. Did you forget Dad? Forget what I looked at Dorothy. She stood distributing packets to each board member. The clause Grandpa Howard put in the bylaws. Richard grabbed the packet. His face went pale as he read. What is this? Dorothy spoke in her professional, unemotional voice. Section 18, subsection 9. If the majority shareholder makes a decision that is deemed by 3 or more board members to be fundamentally detrimental to the company's values, mission, or financial viability, those board members may call for an emergency vote to remove the current CEO. Upon successful vote, control passes to the shareholder with the second largest stake. The room erupted. Richard stood so violently, his chair tipped backward. This can't be legal. It is, Dorothy said. I drafted it myself in 2013 at Howard Sterling's request. It's been in the bylaws for 12 years. You signed the updated bylaws. You just never read past page 50. Madison looked confused. What does this mean? It means, Maria said gently, that if 3 board members believe your father's decision to make you CEO would harm Sterling, we can vote to remove him and install Eleonora instead. You can't do this, Richard said. His voice shook with rage and fear. This is a hostile takeover. This is betrayal. This is protecting what Howard built, Patricia said. She stood. I call for an emergency vote. Richard Sterling's decision to appoint an unqualified CEO is fundamentally detrimental to Sterling and Company's future, seconded, James said immediately. Third, Maria added. Dorothy looked around the table. The motion is valid. All board members must now vote. The question before you is whether Richard Sterling's decision represents a fundamental detriment to the company. A yes vote removes Richard as CEO and installs Eleonora Sterling, who holds 35% of shares. A no vote allows Richard's decision to proceed. Patricia, yes. James, yes. Maria, yes. Brad hesitated, looked at the financial data still displayed on the screen, looked at Richard. Finally, no. I vote no. Catherine also no. Richard can't vote on his own removal, Dorothy said. Madison is a board member. You can vote or abstain. Madison was crying. I don't know. I abstain. Dorothy made notes. 3 yes votes, 2 no votes, 1 abstention. The motion passes. Effective immediately, Richard Sterling is removed as Chief Executive Officer of Sterling and Company. Eleanora Sterling assumes the role of CEO as per the succession clause. The room exploded with noise. Richard was shouting threatening lawsuits, calling this illegal. Madison ran out sobbing. Linda, who had been waiting outside, burst in demanding to know what happened. More shouting, more threats. I stood at the front of the room next to the screen, still showing the data. Patricia, James, and Maria came to stand beside me. A united front. Security was called. Richard left shouting that he'd sue, that he'd fight this, that I'd stolen his company. The threats echoed down the hallway even after he was gone. When the room finally quieted, I looked at the 3 board members who'd supported me. Thank you. Don't thank us, Patricia said. You earned this. Now you have to prove it was the right decision. I will. The next 6 months were the hardest and most rewarding of my life. Richard did sue. 5 different lawsuits, all claiming the vote was illegal, that Dorothy had manipulated Howard, that I'd staged a coup. Every single case was dismissed. The clause was legal. The vote was proper. The court found no evidence of wrongdoing. Richard eventually gave up, sold his 30% of shares to an investment group, and disappeared. I heard he moved to Arizona. Madison reached out 3 months after the board vote. We met for coffee. She apologized, tears streaming down her face. I never wanted to be CEO, she admitted. Dad pushed it. I knew I wasn't ready. I was scared all the time. I listened, didn't interrupt. When she finished, I said, You're good at design, Madison, at understanding what customers want, but running a company requires different skills. I know that now, she said quietly. We weren't close after that. Probably never would be. Too much history. But we were civil. She eventually left. Sterling started her own small boutique design firm. It suited her better. I threw myself into rebuilding Sterling. The first thing I did was bring production back from Bangladesh to ethical factories in the US and partnered facilities in countries with strong labor protections. It cost more short-term, but customers noticed. Our reputation began to recover. I reinstated the sustainability certifications we'd nearly lost, hired a new head of quality control, addressed every employee concern that had been ignored for years. Morale improved dramatically. People started believing in Sterling again. Revenue increased 18% in the first 4 months. Customer satisfaction scores went back above 80%. We won back 2 of the 3 retail partnerships Richard had lost. Industry publications ran stories about Sterling's turnaround. One headline read, Sterling & Co. returns to its roots under new leadership. I turned Howard's old office into a company museum, displayed his original designs, his first contracts, photos of him at age 28, starting this whole adventure. Every new employee went through that room as part of orientation. This is who we are, I'd tell them. This is what we're protecting. I kept my office on the 3rd floor, the small one with no windows. Didn't need a fancy office. Needed to be close to the work, close to the people doing it. One evening, 6 months after taking over, I was working late, reviewing plans for our spring line. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Eleanora. It was Richard's voice. Older, tired. I'm here. Long silence. Then you were right. I wasn't good at this. I let pride and favoritism cloud my judgment. I said nothing. Let him talk. Your grandfather saw it. That's why he made that clause. He knew I'd fail eventually. And Madison. God, I did her no favors pretending she was ready for something she wasn't. No, you didn't. Another silence. I'm not asking for forgiveness or my job back. I wanted you to know. You're doing what should have been done years ago. Thank you for saying that. He hung up. I sat there for a long time afterward, thinking about family, about legacy, about the weight of expectations. Richard wasn't evil, just weak. He'd wanted to love both his daughters equally, but ended up serving neither of us well. I've been CEO of Sterling and Company for 2 years now. Revenue is up 32% from when I took over. We've expanded into 3 new markets. Our sustainability ratings are the highest in the industry. Employee satisfaction is at 91%. We're profitable, growing, and honoring everything Howard built. Sometimes I sit in that museum office surrounded by his legacy, and I feel him there. Proud, relieved, at peace knowing Sterling is in the right hands. People ask me if I'm angry at my father, at Madison, at the years I spent being overlooked. Honestly, no. Those years taught me patience, taught me to build my case carefully, taught me that sometimes the right person has to wait, but when your moment comes, you better be ready to seize it. I learned that underestimation can be a gift. Let people think you're not a threat. Let them dismiss you. All the while you're preparing, learning, documenting, building alliances. When they finally realize what's happening, it's already done. My grandfather knew I'd face this moment. He prepared me for it with those Sunday factory visits, with our conversations, with the clause he'd buried in the bylaws, like a time bomb waiting for the right moment to detonate. He knew Richard would fail, knew Madison wasn't ready, knew I was the only one who truly understood what Sterling meant and what it could be. Sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't money or shares or positions. It's the belief someone has in you, the faith that when your time comes, you'll know what to do. Howard gave me that, and I proved him right. So let me ask you something. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who should have believed in you? Have you ever waited years for your moment wondering if it would ever come? Drop a comment below and tell me your story. I read every single one. And if this story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that patience and preparation pay off. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it reminds you that the right moment is worth waiting for, and when it arrives, you'll be ready. Until next time, keep believing in yourself, even when others don't.